Hello, and welcome to Hurdles to Homeownership, an online panel discussion about the status of the American dream of owning a home in South Dakota. This discussion is hosted by South Dakota Newswatch, the state's first nonpartisan nonprofit journalism organization founded in 2018. This event is the latest in the South Dakota Matters series of polls and panel discussions hosted by Newswatch. I'm Newswatch Content Director Bart Fancook, and I'll moderate tonight's discussion. First, some brief background. In an in-depth article published on December 14th, Newswatch examined how it has suddenly become much harder for many residents of the state to find a good home for sale and to be able to afford it. One of the biggest takeaways from the reporting is that wages have not kept up with the increase in home prices, especially over the past 2 years. According to the State Realtors Association and the U.S. Census, the statewide median home sales price rose by 54% from 2018 to 2022. Meanwhile, household incomes in South Dakota rose by only 17% during that time. Furthermore, the state saw an unexpected interruption to the typically stable real estate market when Governor Kristi Noem embarked on an apparently successful mission to lure new residents to the state during the pandemic. As a result, the price of homes rose rapidly as competition for available properties increased. Some residents, local residents, were priced out of the market. The most recent median home sales price in Sioux Falls and Rapid City are now both over $300,000. The higher prices have squeezed some residents out of the market for buying a home. To further analyze the situation and bring forward some potential solutions, Newswatch has gathered 4 people who each plays a unique role in the homeownership ecosystem in South Dakota. Up front, I'd like to welcome those who are watching this discussion live or a taped version in the days following. For those with us now, you're encouraged to ask questions of the panelists by submitting them on the chat function on the Zoom platform at any time during the event. Now, let me introduce the panelists in alphabetical order. We have with us Steve Ennis, Senior Mortgage Loan Officer with CU Mortgage Direct of Sioux Falls. Shaylin Hurd is a self-employed student and prospective homebuyer from Rapid City. Brandon Martins is an agent with the In Realty Group of Sioux Falls and the president of the South Dakota Realtors Association. And finally, Dick Werner, a former state lawmaker and now president of the Heritage Area Housing Development Corporation. Welcome, panelists, and thanks for being here. Let me get started by asking Shaylin, I wonder if you can share why you and your partner are looking to buy a home now, and where does home ownership fit into your future family plans? And essentially, why is buying a home so important to you and your family?
Well, we just out and about looking, and we had tried to buy a home down in Hermosa a couple weeks back, and things didn't quite go as well as we'd hoped, based on pricing and what we could get qualified for. And it kind of turned around in the last week, and we will be purchasing the home. So it's exciting news. But at the same time, the day we met you, Bart, was kind of a real eye-opener on what's available, what we can afford, what our income is versus all of it. It's a little strange coming from Colorado Springs, where the market was so bad, so high. I thought moving up here it would be a little bit different, and turns out because of COVID, I think it's kind of the opposite. They're very relatable in what's out there.
What is it about home ownership that's important to you?
For me, like I've discussed in the past, I really want to pass something down to, the generations below me. I would love to see my daughter and her family, as she's growing up in the home. My parents bought their first house outside of Hermosa on Highway 40 with 44 acres of land in 1992 for about $46,000. And when they sold that property, and I see where it's at now, and the type of lifestyle I could have, it's definitely a little saddening. So.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that. Steve, I'd like to ask about the migration of out-of-state residents. Can you summarize what happened there with the immediate impacts? And I think the biggest question that myself and others have is, are there potential long-term consequences? Obviously, those people are going to bring new tax revenues, and we want to see growth in our state. And so there's definitely a positive side to it. But I wonder on the home buying situation, if you can address, do you see any long-term outcomes for South Dakota residents, given what took place over the past couple of years?
All right, so just to encapsulate 2020, 2021, And then my commentary is going to be specific to Sioux Falls. I don't have data that I'm familiar with statewide. Our market has had a comfortable, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 or 3 or 4 or 5,000 people net population growth per year, and that's been the trend line for the last 15, 20 years. In 20 and 21, we had a couple of years over 10,000. Okay, and so that supply of bodies really created an imbalance in our local market. We found ourselves always chasing on the availability of dwelling here in Sioux Falls, and we really fell behind the curve during 20 and 21, and that really put the strain on pricing. So we saw the prices of homes shoot up with that increase in demand. So long-term consequences, it's my personal opinion that we'll see a regression to the mean in terms of population growth. We're not going to sit there and be at 2 times the historical trend line. That's not a sustainable spot for the Sioux Falls market to be in. So we'll see growth kind of slow, and we have seen that as other states opened up and there was an availability of jobs. What does that do for the long-term nature of it? We imported a lot of price inflation. Okay, so there were a lot of people from the coast that sold in markets that had higher median price points. That equity was carried to South Dakota, and we saw a lot of novel pricing approaches to purchasing real estate here that disrupted our local market. And so, we find ourselves here right now, kind of in a transitory period in terms of prices, showing some correction with the increased cost of borrowing. Long term, we have to find a way to build more units of housing. We need to be able to build them faster. That's been a challenge here in Sioux Falls for probably 30 years.
Yeah, thank you. And Brandon, as a agent in Sioux Falls and the head of the Realtors Association, what's your current outlook on the market? Are you seeing, we talked about some corrections, and Steve just mentioned that maybe the frenzy's over. What are you seeing out there? And I know you're bullish on the opportunity for homeownership. What do you see now and moving forward for people across South Dakota?
Well, one quick point of clarification, Bart. I am now the past president of South Dakota Realtors for about 15 days. So I got to make sure I disclose that information at this point.
Thank you.
What I will tell you, what I see, Steve's not wrong in regards to the fact that the market has shifted a little bit. I think what we've seen more than anything is over the course of the last 2 years, we watched that price inflate the way that it did, but it didn't happen just in South Dakota. It happened all the way across the nation in every single market. And that was because we were looking at interest rates in that 2 to 3%. So more people were able to buy homes than ever before because of that. And that opened up opportunity. So even if they were moving from other places and changing to a South Dakota address, there was other people shifting into those locations. And now as we look at it, as that interest rate has come back to what we'll call, I guess, a little bit more normal, because it's closer to what the average has been. When we look at that, those are things that we need to take into perspective as well, that there has been a lot of homes sold in that period of time where some of those people would have stayed renting and would have stayed in a different situation because that interest rate was so low, that affordability was so high. And so that is what a lot of that flex is. In the Sioux Falls market itself, it's winter in South Dakota. If we go back to 2019, 2018, even before then, I started in the business in 2005. It's always been slower in December. This is not a surprise. So if we go back and look at numbers the way that they were over the years, that's exactly what we're seeing. It's retroactively the exact same stuff. We just don't have the influx of people moving and shaking around due to an interest rate, which was really darn good, which we probably, everybody on this call, will never see again. And that's because it was a number that just came out of nowhere. No different than this flex over the last 6 months of that interest rate climbing. That came out of nowhere. All of a sudden, Fed started raising rate. Treasury got a little crazy. mortgage rates got higher than normal, and now they're balancing back out. I don't know what Steve was quoting today, but I was seeing anywhere from 5.75 to 5.875, maybe 6 on a 30-year fixed loan. That's what it was when I started in the business in 2005. Obviously, house prices are more, but from 2005 to 2022, we are making more money. Are we making double? Probably not. But that is a scenario we got to look at.
Yeah, we did see a 10% increase in the median family income from 2020 to 2021. So there was a positive move forward there. Thank you for that. Dick, I wonder if you could share with us, you came into this role as a housing coordinator late in your career here. What can you give us a sense for where your passion comes from to help people obtain housing? And I wonder if you could summarize some of the methodologies you've used to have success that was laid out in the article, and certainly from the people I talked to in your community. Could you give us a summary of what you've done there, and maybe a platform for what could be done elsewhere, maybe?
Well, first of all, unlike Steve and Brandon, I come from a community of a little over 400. We have about 227 housing units in our community. But as Steve and Brandon also understand, it's the rural communities that support the urban communities in South Dakota. So we're essential to the ecosystem of housing. The passion comes from, I've had our family's had the pleasure of home ownership. And I just want, late in my career, once I hit the 60s, it was like, try to help others achieve that goal, because it's not an easy task, and it's not something that they may do 2 or 3 homes in their lifetime. Some may only do 1. And so it's not something they're used to doing every day. So having some prior banking and mortgage experience, and I felt it was critical to try to help some people get some home ownership opportunities.
Yeah, thank you, Shaylin. I wonder if you could tell us briefly about the deal that you've arranged there. But moreover, I wonder if you could talk about your situation as income, and you're going back to not exactly what you make, but I know you clean houses, and you're also a full-time student. What's driving you to do that, and how does the home ownership part of that, how does that fit into that equation where you're so busy and trying to get ahead? How easy is that or difficult to pull off?
It's been extremely difficult. Obviously it's easier for families, people that are married. I'm not married. I'm a single mother. I mean, yes, me and my boyfriend are buying a house together, but I started looking for a home last fall when I moved back here from Colorado, and I, was working with Keller Williams on my portfolio and what I do qualify for. And, I don't make a lot of money, obviously. I make a decent amount, but yeah, they looked at me and said, you qualify for about $100,000. And in this market, there's nothing available for me as a home. I want to be home buyer. So I think it's a lot more achievable, for people who are married and people, who have 2 incomes coming into the home. But that's not everybody's situation. Definitely not mine. And as with this property that we were pursuing, it's not your usual buy. That was one of the struggles that we faced in getting approved for a mortgage. The gentleman who had built it kind of built it piece by piece. There's no running septic, there's no water. He does rainwater, it was just an odd buy. And so going through somebody like Black Hills Federal Credit Union, they weren't going to have it. So we kind of just reached out and found some other resources and found some people that were willing to work with us. And I mean, here we are after, when was that? 2 weeks ago we met, Bart? Week and a half. Yeah. In 2 weeks, this woman, and I can't quite remember where she's from. My boyfriend's kind of, doing all the muscle work, but she got the ball rolling, and what she was able to do and able to get us in that 2-week time period was something we had struggled with the credit union for, close to a month and a half, 2 months.
Wow, that's quite a story, and I think that goes to the heart of the difficulty in making that equation work. Given that, I think that leads well into my next question for Steve about during our conversation. I didn't get into this in the piece, but you mentioned that difficulty for young people buying homes could be a factor in the brain drain that we've seen, which is a large number of young professionals in South Dakota leave the state either for better pay or other situations. What role do you see that the housing situation playing in the brain drain, as it were, and what can we do to overcome that or reduce that pressure that we're seeing there?
Yeah, I think there's you got a couple competing issues. Sioux Falls can boast being like the #1 market for entrepreneurs in the nation, right? So that's an awesome statistic. We've got a good supportive and collaborative community that has those economic opportunities. And, there seems to be a real make sense opportunity, locally here in the big city to find affordable housing for those folks. And just, I think it was Shaylin, her name is masked here. Yeah, as Shaylin mentioned, it is difficult on a single income for anybody, doesn't matter what the job is, to make it work, to have enough disposable income to afford a house payment. I know in Sioux Falls, we could use, 100 units where we could have a monthly payment of, $1,200 or less. That's just a big need here, is having a rent equivalent ownership opportunity. And so, yeah, so I think, I'm not from South Dakota. I didn't grow up here. When I got your tip sheet email about some of the questions, I sent a text over to one of my friends that's an attorney here in town. She grew up in Sioux Falls, moved away, came back. Okay. And I asked her that question. I said, what do you think about this brain drain going on in South Dakota? And she cited a couple of points. Number one, our state has to figure out how to pay living wages. Okay. I think that's one of the biggest challenges here in South Dakota. We love to beat the drum about, hey, we don't like regulation. We don't like taxes, right? But there has to be some kind of middle ground here if we want to change the trend. And this isn't a 10-year trend. This is a from statehood trend. Okay. For 140 years, people have been leaving this place, flooding up to Minneapolis to go to college, sticking in the Twin Cities, right? We know that's happened. So, so number one, we got to have more jobs that pay more money. And then number two, we got to be able to, to manufacture housing and just have more of those opportunities. And I do think that housing is a big piece of keeping our young talent sticky and keeping them here, because what we do find is a lot of people do want to come back, right? So if they go to Omaha, if they go to Minneapolis, they go to Fargo, there are a lot of folks when they start having that young family, they do want to come back home, right? So it's like, how do we skip that medium step and just keep them right here, right? And so I do think that part of the conversation is having that workforce housing. And that's not only in the big markets, but like Dick mentioned, we've got a lot of our rural communities that could really use that shot in the arm.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So Brandon, that leads to, so we've got the wage side of the equation and you're on the housing side, given your experience and expertise and connections. Are there ideas out there that could result in freeing up more affordable, either existing or new properties? If you read the piece, you saw that the head of the Sioux Empire Home Builders told me right now, very difficult to build new properties for his association at the 300 point. You had also mentioned something about a trend with possible foreclosures. I wonder if you could bring that up and also just share any thoughts you have on how we get that starter home more available to younger people who do want to stay in our state.
Sure. When it comes down to new construction piece, we've got to look at ways to increase density. We've got to be able to build homes on smaller lots, work with the cities, work with whatever that looks like in regards to setbacks, in regards to how we do curb and gutter, in regards to how we have to do things in those communities to be able to lower that infrastructure cost right out of the gate. Also, there's a few bucks laying around that state's been fighting over that could help some of that as well. I'll just make that statement. Also, when we look at it from that new construction point, it's how do we do things better? How do we use things that are more sustainable in new construction? There's ways around that for sure. We've got to get back to a smaller footprint. You go back in time, and back in the 50s, 60s, there was homes that were built that were in that 600 to 700 square foot range, or a couple bedrooms, a bathroom. I mean, that's what people want. That's what people need. Give them a basement, let them finish that later. There's ways to make this work. We just got to be able to have those cities work with us. And I know that there are builders out there that would like to make that happen. I think it's unfortunately, when you look at developing, it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's going to happen in 2 to 3 years if it started today. And that's the hard part with that. And that's with any community. That's in Sioux Falls, that's in Hermosa, that's in Faith, South Dakota, whatever you want to pick on. It really comes down to what's the best way to do this. Another piece of the puzzle, like you mentioned, Bart, like we mentioned when we chatted, deals with some of the foreclosure shadow inventory, as I'll call it. In 2020 and 2021, there was a foreclosure moratorium that basically said that no foreclosures could happen. And that has always been a part of our business and our market. So when we talk about inventory being low, there is a small percentage that is distressed properties or foreclosure properties that have been just gone. We haven't had HUD homes. We haven't had properties that are distressed on the market for the last couple of years. And if they are, they're very few and far in between. So in time, as people unfortunately have life circumstances, those are typically the reasons: death, divorce, debt, whatever it may be. People make mistakes, and that's just an opportunity for them to reset. So those foreclosures will come onto the market. As you're looking at properties right now, I'd have to pull up the MLS for Sioux Falls to even tell you if there's any on the market currently. If there is, there's maybe a handful. You go back to 2008, there was more than a handful. But normal years, as you look at just even your county sheriff sale list, they're starting to show back up. And for weeks, months, years, there was nothing on there because there couldn't be, because there's a moratorium against it. So we have 2 years of built up foreclosure potential that could come into the market that could help impact some of those first time buyers, some of those people looking to be able to buy a property for a little bit on the lower scale. There's ways around it. It just takes people doing the work and having the conversations and actually making something happen. But there's also that foreclosure inventory that's out there. So.
Yeah, thank you. And I would mention just for our viewers that the home builders executive I spoke with is Tom Jarding, and he said that he thought maybe there would be a way for home builders to come together to invest and create a pool of money where maybe they don't, maybe they can have a lower net margin on those and get something done and speed that process along. So that there's some hope for that there. Brandon, do you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, just really quick with that. I had a conversation with a home builder a few weeks back, and it's come to the point where they're also looking at ways to be able to, how do we privatize our streets? How do we do things differently to take it out of the city's hands? Because they're not allowing for these setbacks to be smaller and just working under a different scope of how to do things. Those are conversations that are out there. So know that the builders are out there doing the work, and they're trying to figure out a resolution, and they know that there's holes, and they talk about it all the time. No different than the realtors do, lenders do. And Shaylin, we know the struggle. And so we're trying to help with the best we can. It's extremely hard. And it is one of those things that patience always wins. And when you're looking at a smaller market, like you are, it's definitely tough to be able to find something because they're not very often that they even hit the market, let alone the price point you're trying to find. So just be patient. I know it's frustrating.
No, thank you. And that's what these conversations are about. And that's what I hope Newswatch reporting is about, is setting the table for those improvements and possible solutions. Now, Dick, we're talking about keeping young people here and helping people find a home in a bigger city. But if you saw the population data I provided in the story, whether it's Harriet or Wessington Springs, you see this downward trajectory, and we've reported on that in the past. I mean, you're trying to basically save your community there and for the future and your school district and your economy. I wonder, are there different challenges that you have in rural communities compared to what we're talking about in Sioux Falls or Rapid? And why is that homeownership piece so important about trying to establish a future for your community itself?
Yeah, just a little bit summary so people know what they're dealing. I moved back to the Harriet in 2016. I was born and raised there, and then spent my career, actually part of it in South Dakota and Minnesota and Montana. So I'm kind of the drain brain that Steve talked about, that you would come back. So there's some question whether I even have a brain. But anyway, when I moved back, our school was just over 100 in census, and they were going to drop below 100, and in fact would have dropped below 90. And I looked at our county's major employer, and the majority of the workforce there and visiting with them lived outside our county, and they had to migrate or travel into our county in order to be able to work. And it came down to having housing availability. And so we worked, a group of 30 of us put a minimum of $5,000 into and formed a nonprofit, a housing group in 2016. And we raised 180,000. Our goal was to build one spec house and try it from there. And we didn't want to have to borrow on it. And we did that. We built it for 180,000. And we actually sold it at the time to a single agronomist. But now that home is occupied by a family of 4, 6 years later. We replicated that twice thereafter with governor's houses that we use. The state's been great to work with there. And one of the homes, governor's house, now has 11 occupants. It's, according to the state, it's the largest single family that occupies a home. We're not talking multiple. These are all one family. And the other one is occupied by a family of 3 that they are professionals. One's a pharmacist and one's a registered nurse. And they travel outside our community to work, but they have chose to live in Harriet. Our fall census this fall was 140 in Harriet. And our population has gone from just about right at 400 to now we're at 477. So it's been housing is critical to saving our rural communities. People want to live there and they want to work there. So I just encourage everybody. Our group is an all volunteer. The challenge versus an urban area is they can afford to hire staff to work on these issues. We're in a town of 227 households. There's nobody going to foot the payroll to make that happen. So that's the biggest challenge for rural. But the other light is in rural, I know every house in town. I know every occupant. So if I know a need, I can visit with them directly. Where in Sioux Falls or Rapid, you don't have that luxury, but you also have other resources. We've partnered with Homes Are Possible, Happy out of Aberdeen, Grow South Dakota, Rural Development, South Dakota Housing Development Authority, which now is called South Dakota Housing. They've been fabulous partners to make our projects come through. And as Brandon talked, there's been some, South Dakota Housing just needs a little more funds to be able to make some things happen. We've leveraged their Housing Opportunity Fund, and we've developed 14 rental units, an 8-plex, a 4-plex, and 2 twin homes. One of them is on this docket for this coming year. And that gives our workforce a place to live until they can have home ownership. And we work with them to get that down payment set aside so then they can fulfill that dream. So it's working, but there are challenges different to urban versus rural. The final point on that is we may have one plumber, we may have one electrician, we may have one contractor, where in your urban areas you have multiple ones. So we are, that's the drawback we have. So.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think every community needs a Dick Werner who to come in and put your feet on the ground and your brain on the project. So thanks for what you're doing there. I know it's made a big difference. Shaylin, back to you. I know you have an 8-year-old daughter, and we talked a little bit about the future here, but what values are you trying to instill in her with home ownership, and how do you see her prospects, say 20 years down the line, to afford or to be able to afford a home? Are you hopeful, or where's your head at on that for the future of your daughter?
I mean, I'm definitely hopeful. Sitting in on this panel kind of, brightens my future a little bit for her. I think, and this kind of popped in my head while everybody was talking, and feel free to chime in because this isn't something I'm too familiar with, but I know I've worked up in Hill City, coming from Hermosa. I've graduated from Custer. These are all small rural areas. Hermosa's population, I think about 500 or less, 300 back when I lived in town. But I know one of the struggles that they're facing right now is people moving in from out of state and buying the available properties for rentals, for vacation rentals. And so, yeah, that's something I definitely would like to get some opinions about. But as for, the future of my daughter, going to college is that's one of the things I'm doing to try and help, show her that you get that education, you go find a good job and you start tucking it away. But at the same time, I've talked to her, and she's only 8, so she kind of doesn't understand, but I'm going to be working with her for quite a while throughout the next couple of years, is when when you graduate college or you graduate high school, that should be your first goal. Don't go out and get into the rental history. You go out, you save that money, and you work with people like we have on this panel. You work with lenders, and you get yourself into that house right away. Don't wait like I did till I'm, 35, pushing 40, trying to break into the market. Do it while you're young, do it while you have that ambition, that drive, and, the possibility of the money too,
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. That adds a lot. Steve, back to you here. You talked about the wage and home price disparity. And you mentioned again, as you did in our conversation, that for years, South Dakotans like to pay about $1,000 or $1,200 a month for a mortgage. Clearly, that's not going to get you a $300,000 home. Also, if you want to avoid private mortgage insurance, you got to get 20% down. So you have to save a pretty significant nut before you can achieve that to bring your monthly down. Is there wiggle room in that equation? I mean, what happens if prices keep moving upward? If there isn't a major correction back down, can anything be done that you know of to create more real estate purchasing power for in-state residents?
You got some macro items that we're really facing here. Anybody that paid attention to Jerome Powell's comments yesterday is, it should be pretty clear what the markets should expect. I mean, we aren't going to get a pivot. Rates are not going to ease. I mean, we're talking 2023. We're not going to get the pivot next year. Rates are going to go higher, and they're going to be sustained, because what we have to do is we have to push prices down. Okay. This is going to create this awkward intersection where we had some major supply chain disruption on the building material side, which created huge input costs into building a home, right? So what South Dakota didn't experience in 2008 through 2012 that Minneapolis did, and where I was, is it was typical to build a house where the input cost drastically exceeded the market value. That's a phenomenon that this state hasn't had to contend with. And so when I moved here in 2015, I fell out of my chair when I saw construction lending with 5% down, because I'd never seen that before. Somebody had to have 20% skin in the game because they needed that thing to be able to appraise. And so this market was such that put 5% down, build it. Hey, I got 30% equity now. So we're gonna really be in some kind of uncomfortable territory here for probably a good year or two. And that's the challenge that our market faces, is that we are a growing state. There are a lot of businesses that want to move here. There are a lot of individuals that want to move here. How do we keep the construction industry going full bore? We can't fall behind, because that makes this problem much, much worse. That's the macro challenge that we have at the federal level, the state level, the county level, the city level, is how do we keep moving forward when the input, when that whole equation of what it costs to build and what it's worth in the market doesn't balance out. We're going to be upside down here for a bit. Okay. So I think that's one of the major challenges. Just to get back on topic though, to answer your question, when we talk about that target $1,000 or $1,200 payment, that's your workforce housing. So I know Brandon's a player in his profession. Brandon helps. He's got some clientele that he works with that we're providing that sub $250,000 price point. It's a busy part of my practice too. How do we get back on track? Well, it's rates. Rate is the big piece there. Sure, price is a component in there as well. But we can't have a correction of affordability that is only predicated on rate, because if rates fall back down, prices continue to go up. That can't be the economic balancing act that happens. We have to have a 25% price correction. Okay, that's probably what the global number is. We have to have the prices come down, and nobody wants that. It's painful. But that was when the Fed decided to let the genie out of the bottle a couple of years ago, and you let inflation into the economy, that's what happened. We had a lot of our asset prices get drastically inflated.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I know you're doing your best to keep that at a low level for us who aren't in the game, but I know, Brandon, I see you smiling, and I just saw, I think it was a Wall Street Journal article this week, that 300,000 home buyers across the country who closed deals in the past 2 years are underwater already. And that's from a correction that's occurred. Do you, first of all, I wonder if you have any reaction to what Steve was saying, but also additionally, do you see any major correction on the horizon here where, because something like that could keep people trapped where they are and prevent that upward movement that I think we all see as part of the American dream too. You age, you earn more, you buy a bigger house or a better location or more garage stalls. That stalls out if there's a big correction. So I know that's a lot right there, but I could see you smiling, and I know you have something you want to say. So I really want to hear it. So
no, you're fine, Bart. You can ramble as much as you need to. I totally get it. When we look at that, it comes down to this. It comes down to the fact that this is cyclical. This is not new. Every few years, guess what happens? Housing isn't as affordable as what it was. We go back to 2008, 2009. It wasn't a good time to sell your house, period. So how about don't sell during a recession? We're in a recession. It's been a negative couple quarters in a row. This is not a newsflash. So if you're going to buy now, don't plan on selling in a month. Plan on holding and staying put. This is not a time where we're going to just make money hand over fist. This is a time where you have to buckle down and treat this as a long-term investment. Average home buyer is going to stay in a house longer now than they have in years past anyway. Used to be anywhere from about 5 to 7. Now, I think NAR's last numbers were 7 to 9. And so you've got 7 to 9 years to live in that home. In that period of time, you're going to be able to find a time where it makes sense to sell your house. In response to Steve's 25% number, I think that's probably a little bold for what South Dakota is going to see. I guess he and I can figure out a wager later, because I know Steve. But at the same time, there is a situation there where anything's possible. At the same time, when we look at this as what it is, real estate is not short-term gain. This is not a quick nickel. This is a slow dime. And when you look at what a house was worth back in 1978, and you flash forward 45 years, I can do that math. That's almost 45. We look at that. What was that house worth back then? 60 grand. Same house today is selling for $300 and some thousand in Sioux Falls. You've got to tell me that these house prices have gone up. In time, that's all going to happen. This is all cyclical. What goes up, goes up. What comes down, comes down. It's going to go around and it's going to do its thing. Again, going back to Shaylin's comment that she said before we got into this conversation, and being a little bit more encouraged and being positive about this, I want to keep chiming in on that, because that's really what this is about, is that there is possibility in this market. Dick, you brought something up when you were talking before about governor's houses. That's something that's usually not embraced in the city of Sioux Falls, but that's something that could definitely be looked at. What are those opportunities that we're just falling asleep at the wheel at? There's opportunities that are out there that we just don't talk about enough. I think that when we look at what the affordability is right now, yeah, it's messy. Interest rates screwed us up a little bit. At the same time, as those interest rates balance out, we could see them trickle down. Fed's going to do another hike here the first quarter. Everybody knows that. It's in the report. This is not news. This is something they reported a long time ago. And so here we go. They're going to do another hike. 10-year Treasury is going to adjust a little bit. It's going to shorten up or expand the spread of what the mortgage is compared to the Treasury. And then we're going to look at what the interest rates are going to be. The 10-year Treasury compared to interest rates were spread a long ways here the last few months. Average is 1.7%. It was like 3.2%. That was way too much. But it was the mortgage industry trying to figure out what was going to happen with inflation and trying to correct everything. That's why we're at 7%. That wasn't going to be anything that was long-term. They're trying to figure out the adjustment. So as we look at what the spring market has to hold, who knows? We could be setting at the same rate we are right now or higher, or we could be lower. We could be at a 5% interest rate, which in my world, that's a great interest rate. Don't get me wrong. 3 is way better. And 2.5 is even better than that. But my first house in 1999 was 8.625 was my first interest rate in 1999. And that was in Des Moines, Iowa. And that house today is worth a heck of a lot more than what it was. And if I would have bought that house now and sold it, imagine where I'd be. I'd have hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank because I purchased that home when I did. That's the same conversation right now. Shaylin, you're going to find a house for around 100 grand. In a few years from now, it's not going to be worth 100 grand anymore. You're probably going to buy something a little distressed. You're going to go in there, do some work. You're going to put some paint on it. You're going to make it look pretty, right? It's going to be worth more. That is the American dream. And that is what it comes down to: improving property, making homes homes. And it's for the families, for the people that live there, whether they're single parents, whether they're not single parents, whether they're single people, and if they're just people that just showed up in the States. That's totally fine. That's what homeownership is. And if we lose focus on that and start worrying about the sky falling, we are going to have problems. Because yeah, there's correction that could happen. But if we don't focus on the positive and focus on the fact that we live in one of the best damn states in the union, I don't think we have anything to complain about.
Well, I appreciate that. And you sound like you're still the president of the Realtors Association, even though 2 weeks removed. You know, Dick, I wanted to talk to you. We're talking about kind of a high level home situation here, but what South Dakota needs from your discussion, and my discussion, we've got immigrants coming in, a labor force shortage. We've got some big new employers coming to Sioux Falls, including likely another pork plant. You talked about Pig Improvement Corporation up by you in Mound City. Who are those people coming here, and what are the prospects for them to establish themselves as the part of the fabric of our community when they are probably trying to send some money home, perhaps, may have a number of children, a language barrier? What's going on up there in Harriet that I know is also happening in Sioux Falls, and how do we accommodate or open the door to homeownership for people at that level of income?
Yeah. So to Steve's point, in Sioux Falls, 1,000 to 1,200, I assume it's principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. That may be a workforce housing. But in Harriet, South Dakota, and many rural communities across South Dakota, ours is in that 600 to 750 range. And basically it's the same thing. Steve's matching what they would pay for rent. And likewise in our community, that's what we'd be matching for rent. So we've developed 14 rental units to allow those people time to have a nice, affordable place to live save some money, and then buy a home. I lived in Huron before I moved back here, and I saw what diversity does for a community. It's critical. I always tell everybody, if you're a small Midwest, if you're in the Midwest and you're not willing to accept diversity, you're not going to grow, because the Norwegians, the Swedes, and the Germans are done coming. And so we have now in our community 40 Hispanics that have been overwhelmingly accepted in our community. And they work at the pork plant. 4 of them we have had been successful in helping them buy homes in our community, which is a bit of a challenge because the majority of them are on 3-year work visas. Well, when you go to a bank, they do not want to lend to 3-year work visas. We have one that has a green card. So we've had some challenges we worked around, but they are the lifeline of our community. And getting that affordable and then helping them achieve not only a very nice place to live as a rental, but then have the next stream of how we can help them get their first home. And what we found with them, this is a saying I'm going to say, that I found that grandkids don't want grandma's house anymore. But you know, it has no walk-in closet. It has no master bathroom. It's got at best a single stall garage attached. If not, it's a detached garage. And so, but these people, it's their palace, and you can help them achieve that. And it's been very rewarding. I'm not certain, Bart, I might have strayed off, but they are our future for our communities across the state.
Well, and that goes to the big question we've reported on previously about employment and the need for workers. So there's going to have to be some solutions found there. Wanted to go back to Shaylin. So when I met you, you were looking at a house on Galaxy Drive in Rapid City. Looking at the flyer there, it was $289. I know you mentioned the Hermosa property. A lot of work to do there, a lot of hurdles to overcome. You've got to get some infrastructure in there. I wonder, what was at the heart of your decision? Was it financial, or was it sort of what Brandon was talking about, this idea where you come in low and you are investing sweat equity to build your financial future, and somewhere down the line you're able to either stay there and maybe take money off of the property if you needed to? But what was at the heart of that decision to move from a completed, pretty much move-in ready property around 300 to move to a place where you don't even have basic infrastructure?
Yeah, we get a lot of questions like that, you know, why we're choosing that route. You know, and I'm from a generation where it's kind of 50-50. You know, yes, it's wonderful to have everything built, and at the same time, I'm excited to build it how I want to build it. You know, one of the big deciding factors is the property is literally probably 3 miles from my old property that I grew up on. You know, 3.5 acres of land for under $200,000, where right now they appraised another home over in that area with the land value, and it's over 400. So yeah, the opportunity to not only, you know, have a nice chunk of land for my kid to get to play on, you know, growing up in Colorado Springs, where she goes to walk out the front gate and my heart stops, you know, thinking, oh, somebody's going to take her, somebody's going to snag her. That was a big deciding factor to why I moved back to this state. My childhood growing up here was just phenomenal. Me and my brothers would disappear for hours, you know, and Mom wasn't worried because this is just, it's so beautiful here. And so yeah, it's really just like he said, I want an investment. I want to put some hard blood, sweat, and tears into making something that's my own, that I can be proud of. And me and my boyfriend are even talking about, you know, possibly building some sort of a bed and breakfast, something of that nature, to where we can bring people to what we're building. We can, you know, almost create our own business in a way, to where we're not traveling to the city to work, but we're bringing people to us to show them, you know, what this beautiful state has to offer.
Yeah, that's just terrific. And thank you for being here, because I think a lot of your comments go right to the heart of what we're talking about and what we're trying to accomplish as a group here today and as a state And as for Newswatch as an organization, I would note, I want to turn toward potential solutions in our last 10 minutes here. Steve, given what you know now, you talked about trying to, bring wages up. What can we do? What if you were Governor Ennis, or Senate President Ennis? What do we do? And I don't mean to say it's all at the legislative level, but what can we do here? What needs to be done? Who needs to take the lead, and how do we move forward from where we are now?
I'm kind of just at the heart. I went to school for economics. I'm a free market mentality. I don't like to see a heavy hand in government. Brandon probably shakes his head yes there too. I mean, we think the free market can react more appropriately, see opportunity, and that's kind of the way it should be. I don't know how to. There's so many steps to the question, but how do we get back on track? Part of it is South Dakota would need to stop seeing this as South Dakota. This isn't the most open-minded state in terms of like, hey, we're going to do it differently, right? And so part of what we need to do is we have to like agree that we need to address the housing shortage. I agree with everything Brandon said earlier. We need to have smaller footprints. We need to be able to punch more units. We here in Sioux Falls, so many of the covenants of our neighborhoods have a foundation minimum size of 1,500 square feet, right? And we're building homes that are bigger than what most people need, right? So we're creating inefficiencies. And the way we keep costs low is, hey, we don't finish the bottom part, right? We need a more diverse approach to housing. The one thing that never gets talked about is we talk about new construction sprawl, where we're turning our former ag land into residential, right? Minnehaha County loves that because we're plowing in an entirely new tax base, right? But the one thing that's never talked about is how do we go to the original core of Sioux Falls, that's 1890 to 1940, which is square miles and thousands of units, and how do we make those neighborhoods that already are serviced by street and infrastructure, how do we make those homes livable? How do we make them desirable, right? There's a huge opportunity there. We're talking about the political football of the COVID funds that the governor wants to control. Our legislature awarded that to be watched by South Dakota Housing, so that one's getting kicked around a little bit. There's opportunity there, but I think at the end of the day, we have to, as a collective people, want to give a damn enough to see this thing changed. Do we really care about the brain drain, or do we just like to talk about it? Are we actually going to commit to paying more? Well, guess what? What's the other side of having increased labor costs? Right? Brandon, shake your head, right? You're seeing it. We'd have to charge more, right? It's a direct inflationary approach, right? And inflation is we can all agree one of our biggest issues that we're facing right now. I don't know how to do it. I don't have the solution. I don't pretend to have the solution.
That's okay. I appreciate you trying, and I know you're a student of the market and the real estate industry, and so I appreciate your thoughts. Dick, I know one of the things that you're doing up there and is rehab, and I think that's what Steve's talking about: rehabbing existing properties, making them more livable, more attractive, and that could lead to rebirth of some older neighborhoods, whether it's in Harriet or Sioux Falls or any town across the state. I'd like you to address that briefly about the success you've seen from those rehab efforts, but also as a former lawmaker, is there a role for government in this? Is there a larger role for government in this equation? I wonder if you could share your thoughts on that.
Well, first of all, in the rehab side of it, again, I know every house in town, I know every occupant, and Out of our 227 homes, we identified 30 that we thought would be good candidates for rehab. Bottom line is we didn't want them to fall into disrepair, that either they're going to become vacant someday or they become a hunting or fishing home, because they don't do anything for your community. Not that we don't welcome them here, but we don't need somebody buying up a cheap home just to have as their hunting or fishing shack. So we've been successful in getting rehab money through Happy and Grow and the South Dakota Housing Development, and we've rehabbed 18 of them already, with either new siding, new roofs, new heating, new cooling, egress issues, because a lot of these older homes in these smaller footprints did not have egress windows in their lower levels. And so that's been very successful. So now when them homes come on the market, they will have a lot of things that the appraisers don't have to address when it comes time to resell. The other thing is, I do feel that government can play a role, and it's not taking control, it's being there to help. I think Brandon and Steve are aware of the 200 million that was the ball that was going up and down between the Governor's Office of Economic Development and the South Dakota Housing. I'm just going to say this: the Governor's Office, or GOED as everybody refers to it, they do a very good job in economic development. But the South Dakota Housing Development, in my opinion, is the best kept secret in the state of South Dakota. And let them run with that ball and let them do what they need to do. The other thing is, the legislature last year, and I haven't looked at the governor's budget this year, and I've made several legislators aware. In 2016, I was part of the legislature that passed Build South Dakota. In there was a program called Housing Opportunity Fund. Last year, the legislature did not fund that program. We have used that program in the city of Harriet, South Dakota, 3 times over the last 2-3 years. And we were able to develop properties that we would have never been able to do without that. They've also provided down payment assistance to Grow and Happy that we've been able to leverage for our homeowners. Down payment assistance is huge. For instance, the Governor's House program, we use them as infill in our lots. We didn't use them in new developments. We use them as infill, because a lot of these old lots in these old towns, they're either 50, 75, or 100. 100 would be a luxury. They're either 50 or 75. So we've used the narrow lot Governor's House in that. We've developed lots, 150 by 150 foot lots with water and sewer to the lot line that you can purchase in Harriet, South Dakota for $7,500 a lot. That's almost unheard of across the state. So now if you want to have paving there, that's probably another $5,000, but you're not going to have curb and gutter. Okay, that's just Harriet, South Dakota. I feel the legislature this session needs to figure this $200 million out, because there's no reason for it sitting there idle when it can do a lot of things in our state. And also allocate at least $5 million to Housing Opportunity Fund, if not more, because it probably needs 10 million. They're there to help. They are not there to run the program. Just give us the little tools that we need and assistance. So that's my plug.
Well, thank you. And I want to, that concludes our 1 hour period. And I want to thank everyone.
Hey, Bart,
Brandon,
really quick.
Yeah,
Bart,
if you've got, go ahead. One final thought, Brandon.
Yeah, if I can plug into what because I got kind of skipped on that section there. When I look at what Sioux Falls is doing in that core neighborhood and some of what Dick was just talking about, those same programs are happening right here in the city. We've working with private business. We're working with the city. The city has community development that they're working with all the time, helping landlords and homeowners be able to get into that core neighborhood to be able to really make a difference. And then also you've got Sioux Empire Housing Partnership. You've got all these different things right inside of Sioux Falls that are always looking at exactly what Dick was talking about, that infill piece, where there is a property that is distressed enough that needs to go away. And then another one is put in its place. Those things do happen all the time. And that's something that we're going to continue to see and strengthen that core of Sioux Falls while the city continues to grow. in all areas. And one more shout out to Shaylin. Keep your chin up.
Well, thank you, Brandon. I appreciate it. And that will conclude our session tonight. I want to thank everyone for being here and everyone who views live and also later on. I want to wish everyone a happy holidays and also mention that you can continue to read in-depth nonpartisan material on a weekly basis at sdnewswatch.org, and it's all free and it's all available to you at any time. So thank you to everyone again, and happy holidays to all. Good night.